Ever since Maud was killed by a t-shirt cannon, Ned Flanders' love life has been pretty chaotic. I mean, at one point, he almost even hooked up with Marge.
Ned, you got whipped cream in your mustache. Your perfectly trimmed mustache.
But eventually Ned settled down with the most unlikeliest of ladies, Edna Krabappel. They got married and for a while he was very happy, but then she died and just like that, Ned became a bachelor all over again. So he went on to have a fling with Sideshow Mel's wife.
Ah, the cuckold!
Got back together with Maud's ghost.
There is no God, Nettie. It's just an empty, meaningless void.
Isn't she pretty?
Before then going on to marry literally every single woman in Springfield. So I thought it would be really fun to unpack the complicated love life of old Neddy, and along the way we can see if we can find out who his true soulmate is. Was it Maud, Edna, or someone else entirely? So let's start at the very beginning with Maud Flanders. Even though Ned was introduced all the way back in the show's pilot, his wife Maud wasn't introduced until season 2, in the episode Dead Pudding Society.
There's my little popcorn ball. Kissy kissy.
Oh, hello, sponge cake.
And she wasn't so much of a character, but more like another reason for Homer to feel inferior to Ned and his seemingly perfect life.
Your wife's butt is higher than my wife's butt. You make me sick.
Now, this would be a running theme for the early days of their relationship, with their perfect marriage highlighting all of the flaws in Homer and Marge's, a comparison that would be hugely evident in Season 2's The War of the Simpsons.
Not those peanuts.
Huh?
The ones at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
It was this incident that caused friction in Homer's marriage, leading on to the two of them attending a marriage counselling camp where we learn how small the Flanders issues really were compared to The Simpsons. Here they were presented as cartoonishly perfect and unrealistic, with the only real friction being that Maud underlines passages in Ned's Bible when she can't find hers.
Oh, lucky you don't keep guns in the house.
Homer, why are you here?
Oh, because I got drunk and looked down her dress.
It wouldn't be until season 3's when Flanders failed where we saw a far more realistic side to their marriage, one that deviated from the overly idealised image of their relationship before, because when Homer wishes for Ned's new business, the Leftorium, to fail, his wish comes true, leading to Ned closing the store, and ultimately driving him into bankruptcy. But Maud remains positive, keeping the family spirits high while Ned struggles. And when Homer turns Ned's fortune back around, she's supportive in that too, showing that she's there for him through the highs and lows of life. And season 8 Hurricane Eddie displayed a similar support for her husband when their house got destroyed.
By golly, first thing tomorrow we're going to open up the Leftorium, and before you know it, we'll be back on our feet.
But that said, she doesn't always stick by his side, like in Bart's comment where she didn't really put up much of a fight when Ned sacrificed his spot in the shelter.
Oh, I'm coming with you, Nettie.
No, sweetheart. You stay here because...
Okay.
Thus marking a shift in her character, which was one that leaned far more into the whole judgmental Christian and clutch my pearl stereotype. She soon became opinionated and at times antagonistic, like in her spying and judgment of Marge in Marge in Chains.
Just wash your hands and get out.
But she also showed that she could be wiser and far more realistic than Ned, like when she stepped in to stop him from purchasing a crappy house in Realty Bites.
Now slow down, Nettie. The home buyer's course said always look inside the house before buying.
And when she solved the witch problem in Treehouse of Horror 8 with gingerbread children.
Maud, do something!
Are you sure you ladies wouldn't prefer some gingerbread children instead?
But just when Maud was growing some kind of momentum in her character, by season 10 she pretty much fades into the background, mostly really there to be Ned's support or set up a punchline, thus bringing her back to how she was introduced, just Ned's nice wife. But I do think that there's a reason for this. Enter Ginger.
I'm Mrs. Ned Flanders.
Ah!
So while Ned was still with Maud, he got married to his second wife Ginger in Viva Ned Flanders. After Ned Flanders reveals that he's 60 and looks young due to his clean living, everyone pities him for being so boring.
You name it, I haven't done it.
Geez, Flanders, you're 60 years old and you haven't lived a day in your life.
So to prove them wrong, he joins Homer on a trip to Las Vegas where they gamble, drink, and end up married to two barmaids, Amber and Ginger.
Okay, you're saying that Ned and me married you two.
Oh yeah, we're hitched all right. Till death do us part.
And despite this wedding ultimately being a drunken mistake, this was really significant in terms of Ned's love life, because by this point he was just a religious and annoyingly perfect neighbour to Homer, and apart from 2 breakdowns, there were no real rough edges to him, as like I said, everything from his kids to his wife were absolutely perfect.
You remind me of silly Billy Ned Flanders.
Ned, who was always depicted as this wholesome, straight-laced and pious neighbour, getting caught up in wild Las Vegas, including marrying a woman like Ginger, who is portrayed as loud, brash and somewhat trashy, creates a sharp contrast with his usual personality and his lifestyle, and, of course, his marriage to Maud. It showed her wanting to rebel against his own mundane life, and that he can indulge in reckless behaviour when Maud's not around. This is partly why I feel Maud's presence began to shrink in the 10th season, to make way for these wacky storylines that pushed Ned out of his normal life. It's by this point that the writers may have already seen potential in a single Ned and less of a place for Maud. Now, I don't want to move on without saying that Ginger does eventually return when she tracks Ned down. So, don't be a Ned, make yourself untrackable from hackers, malware, ads and your Las Vegas wife with NordVPN. It's your online protection that keeps your internet activity completely private, because who really needs to know what you're doing online anyway? I would always recommend using a VPN while using the internet, but what's so special about NordVPN is that it's one of the fastest and comes with their dark web monitor. This feature basically gives you a heads up if your credentials ever get leaked, so you can change your passwords fast, shutting down any threats before they can even start. They also offer a smart play feature so you can securely enjoy your favourite shows and movies no matter where you are, working automatically when you connect so there's no setup needed, keeping your streaming safe and private on any device. In fact, you can secure up to 10 devices with just one single account. So if you're curious and would like to start using the internet a bit more wisely while supporting this channel, grab my exclusive deal with 4 bonus months for free at nordvpn.com/Simpsons. It's also worth noting that it's totally risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to Ned's very complicated love life. After Ned's drunken whirlwind marriage to Ginger, we then get season 11, aka the season that killed Maud Flanders. In Alone Again Natra Diddley, Maud was knocked off the stand after returning with some snacks for the car rally. This marked a huge moment in Simpsons history, a recurring and arguably prominent character killed off for good with her tombstone set amongst the likes of Bleeding Gums Murphy, Frank Grimes, and Beatrice Simmons. But why? So to give some background, there was a pay dispute between voice actress Maggie Roswell and the network. She wanted a pay rise to cover her travel expenses because she was flying to and back from Denver, but the greedy Fox executives only offered her $150. So she decided to leave, and frankly, I don't blame her.
Oh, the network slogan is true. Watch Fox and be damned for all eternity.
So with Roswell gone, Fox found a replacement with Marcia Mitzman-Gavin, who not only took over for Maud, but also her other characters. And she had already been performing these roles for several episodes before this one.
Oh no, that's leprosy. Remember those scary lepers in Ben-Hur?
Even still, the writers still chose to kill off Maud, and according to the DVD commentary, this decision wasn't entirely because Roswell left, as the writers explained that they also wanted to take Ned's character in a new direction.
The actress who played Maud Flanders had decided to leave the show for a while. So we were talking about it and saw it as an opportunity to possibly explore Ned's character and maybe do something different. And it may have been George who actually said, "Let's kill Maud."
So while Roswell's departure likely influenced this choice, it seems like the writers had already begun to feel that Ned's character had outgrown the strict family dynamic that he'd been confined to for over a decade. And Viva Ned Flanders really marked this turning point, showing that Ned could be even funnier as a single guy ready to marry a stranger in Las Vegas. This shift also helps explain why Maud's character had gradually been fading into the background even before her official exit. It's possible that the writers already planned to move on from her, and Roswell's departure simply gave them the opportunity to follow through with it. Maud depicts the earlier, perhaps more grounded stories in The Simpsons. They were the perfect neighbours that drove Homer up the wall, providing more of a realistic day-to-day conflict for Homer, and so their relationship was depicted as idealistic. And while I think that there was more scope for stories with this kind of dynamic, I guess the writers didn't. Now, personally, I always wondered why Maud's meaner side couldn't have been brought into their relationship, but then again, maybe it would have dirtied the holy waters, and Ned was due for natural progression into becoming Springfield's most eligible bachelor. I don't know, but it was definitely something that Homer noticed.
Single women of Springfield, your prayers have been flanchered. Ned Flander, that is.
So Homer took it upon himself to create a dating video for Ned to attract some new ladies.
Now we'll just send this to the dating service, the chicks will fall for you, and bam! The healing begins.
And that first lady was Lindsay Naegle. Now, Naegle did offer a very efficient and corporate pitch to Ned to be his new beau, but unfortunately she prioritised her fax machine over their first date. And honestly, I think it was doomed from the start because, well, she was basically the cold plunge after his and Maud's relationship because she's so different from her. She doesn't hang on to Ned's every word and she prioritises almost everything else over their potential new relationship. So, that was a failure. So next up was ironically Edna Krabappel. Despite getting married later on, their first date was rather fruitless, with Edna basically using Ned to make Skinner jealous.
Edna, this is childish.
Fine, then hang up.
I will hang up when he leaves.
By this point in the show, Edna's stereotype was basically a lonely divorcee who was paired up with a lot of different guys. Mr. Bergstrom, Woodrow Wilson, aka Bart, Jay Kramer, Skinner, Comic Book Guy, and even Sideshow Bob. So for this point in time, it wouldn't really have made sense for her to settle down with someone like Ned. But we'll circle back to Nedna later. But for now, let's move on to Diane. Now, unfortunately for Diane, her mother issues and over-attachment to her dog were enough to make Ned sail away on a swan. These disastrous days made it very clear that Ned wasn't really ready to move on from Maud. He even questioned God for taking her, ultimately turning his back on religion because of her death. I mean, if there wasn't anyone in Springfield who seemed like a good match, maybe he just had to wait for someone from out of town. Rachel Jordan was the singer of the Christian rock group Covenant, and her more contemporary approach to worshipping God contrasted majorly against the traditional style that Maud and Ned had practiced for years. And even though Ned did tell her that he wasn't quite ready for a coffee date, he still was rather mesmerised by her, with the episode closing with Rachel saying that if she was ever back in town, maybe they can go out someday. And personally, I really liked this ending because Ned's decision to say that he wasn't quite ready felt like it ended on his terms, while also opening up the possibility that Ned could have a future without Maud and be with someone who might be able to push him out of his comfort zone, which it did with Rachel Jordan returning in season 12's I'm Going to Praiseland.
I didn't have a crush on her.
Are you blushing, Mr. Flanders?
At an ice cream social, Ned bumps into Rachel and invites her to spend the night at his place, and he claims to have moved from Maud's death. However, she soon learns that he still clings onto Maud's memory, like insisting that Rachel avoids Maud's spot in the bed and even cutting her hair to look like Maud's.
Oh my God, you're trying to make me look like your dead wife!
Understandably horrified, Rachel leaves, which forces Ned to confront the painful truth. He hasn't truly moved on from Maud.
Not over Maud at all.
Yeah, maybe it was too soon. Well, aren't you gonna invite me in?
So the next day, the Simpsons help him sort through Maud's belongings and Bart finds her old sketchbook. Inside, he finds her last wish, an amusement park called Praiseland, and Ned makes her wish come true by building it. After weeks of preparation, Praiseland opens, but it's a total flop, featuring strange attractions like a psalm reading ride and a statue of Maud.
Maud, God is super.
Can I sit in the car?
Let's both sit in the car.
But just as the park faces a closure, a Miracle Maud moment phenomenon occurs, boosting popularity. However, after a misunderstanding involving a gas leak, some orphans, and a very angry crowd, Praiseland closes its gates. But perhaps the most poignant moment for Ned in this episode was him reconnecting with Rachel, who is now wearing a wig, and together they return to his house to erase Maud's indentation in the bed, finally giving Ned some closure. Rachel Jordan is very important, not just as a love interest, but also because she reveals Ned's vulnerability and his struggle to find companionship after Maud's death. He tried to recreate his old life thinking that it would make him happy, but that doesn't work, and Rachel's more modern approach to Christianity and dating pushed Ned to grow beyond his traditional family values. This marked a shift in him, showing him as a single father now open to new possibilities in life and love. At the end of the episode, it does seem as if Ned and Rachel might continue their relationship, but she never appears again. But ultimately, I feel that this relationship wasn't really about setting Ned up with Rachel for the long term, but rather more about Ned's personal growth, solidified in Homer's last line.
I think Ned is gonna be all right.
In a way, Rachel was a gentle segue into Ned's single life, as she was supportive, understanding, and patient, which was exactly what he needed to move on, paving the way for him to pursue more challenging relationships. And in doing so, she made space for wackier, more unpredictable romantic choices that he would get later on, right in line with the Simpsons shift overall into more outlandish storytelling. Speaking of which, Ginger Flanders returns. When Amber and Ginger surprise their Vegas husbands with a reunion in season 13's Brawl in the Family, it obviously causes friction in Homer and Marge's relationship. But Ned actually tries to make things work with Ginger, even if it is purely to appease his vows under God.
Where's my cigarettes?
We flushed your sin sticks down to hell. Smokers are jokers. Smokers are jokers.
But as it turns out, Ned and his two boys and their goody-goody lifestyle eventually drives Ginger out of town.
You're too goody-goody.
Oh, that's not you talking. That's the honey mustard dressing.
And it never really felt as if this was going to turn into a real relationship, because it was very clear that Ned was only going along with it because he thought it was the right thing to do, while Ginger was mostly just excited about the idea of owning a house with an upstairs. Still, it highlighted just how outlandish Ned's romantic life could really be. And even though his behaviour stayed true to his classic naivety that we have seen before, he was now being pushed into unfamiliar territory, where he had to reconcile his traditional ideals with some less conventional matches. So, if a Vegas waitress didn't work out, why not a movie star? In season 14's A Star Is Born Again, Springfield is holding a dance to celebrate the stinging red jellyfish washing up onto the shore, but Ned feels left out without a partner, so he decides to head to the Leftorium to fill out forms rather than feel lonely on the beach. And it's here where he meets Sarah Sloane, a famous Hollywood actress who is charmed by Ned Flanderisms.
Are you for real?
I'm as real as the nose on your face.
Yeah, real.
She asks him out on a date and the two of them end up making out, despite Ned only really asking to hold hands.
Heaven's Gate, I'm gonna be tasting you on my mustache for a week.
Wanna try for a month?
Ned then introduces Sarah to Rod and Todd right before the tabloids show up, in a scene very reminiscent of Notting Hill. But that doesn't deter Ned, who continues to date his movie star girlfriend. But it was while filming The Zookeeper's Wife that Ned steps in to put a stop to her nude scenes, standing by Sarah as she fought to keep her clothes on, with one condition.
Alright, but you're gonna have to kiss a woman.
Deal.
And she's elated, telling Ned that while the public won't see her naked, he definitely would. Later on, Sarah and Ned go out for a walk where she asks him to go to Hollywood with her, but after Ned fantasizes about Hollywood and all of its horrors, he realizes that he just can't do it. So Sarah tells Ned that she will move to Springfield instead. It's from here that their relationship continues and they quickly become the talk of the town, and things really heat up when Sarah attends a concert with Ned wearing a very revealing dress, something that Ned isn't too comfortable with. And it's here where she confesses that she really wants to take things further with him. They end up making love on a hill nearby, and the following morning they are woken up by the Lupus Fun Run, where Ned then asks Sarah if she would marry him, but Sarah refused, saying that she didn't want to be tied down.
I love you too, and I always will, but unlike the Bible, I guess this ain't gonna have a happy ending.
But on the upside, at least his association with Sarah gave him some luck with the ladies.
Hey, Hollywood. Call me. My number's on the bench.
Before meeting Sarah, Ned's relationships were largely influenced by his idealized and traditional values. But Sarah, a Hollywood actress, was the complete opposite of that, and her more modern approach to life and love pushed Ned out of his comfort zone, both emotionally and sexually. In fact, their relationship exposed Ned's willingness to step beyond his usual boundaries, from navigating the complexities of dating a public figure to supporting Sarah in her career decisions, like standing up against the nude scene. And they may not have been compatible, what with Ned's conservative nature and Sarah's refusal to settle down, but their relationship still served a purpose. It gave us a glimpse of Ned letting loose and stepping outside of his comfort zone. More importantly, it showed that Ned was capable of adapting and evolving, even if it did mean challenging some of his long-held traditional beliefs. It also set the stage for more complicated relationships for him, emphasizing that Ned's journey towards finding love was going to be messy and unpredictable. But one thing that we do know for certain from this relationship was that Ned would prefer to stay in Springfield for love, which makes me think that his true soulmate may be closer to home, perhaps even a neighbour. In terms of Ned's and Marge's relationship, I can think of 3 main episodes that explore it. These are in varying tones. We have Season 4's A Streetcar Named Marge, Season 15's Diatribe of a Mad Housewife, and Season 21's The Devil Wears Nada. In the Season 4 episode, Marge announces that she's auditioning for a local play, but Homer isn't having it, wanting her to stay at home and wait on him instead. But this only makes Marge even more determined to go for it, eventually landing a role as Blanche after the director sees just how miserable and worn out Homer's constant demands make her. Back at home, Marge asks Homer to help her with her lines, but he's far too busy with his bowling game.
Gutter ball.
Oh! You see, Marge, while you're off in your own little world, you forgot that other people have problems too.
So later on, she heads over to Ned's place, who is cast as Stanley in the play. When the play finally reaches the stage, Homer starts off bored, but as it goes on, he begins to empathise with Stanley's treatment of Blanche. And by the end of it, he's so overwhelmed with guilt and sadness that he can't bring himself to clap. And at first, Marge is upset, thinking that he just doesn't care. But Homer then explains that he felt sympathy for her character, and so moved by this, she forgives him, and they leave the theatre on good terms. But yes, in terms of Marge and Ned's relationship, it didn't overtly show them flirting or being romantically interested in one another, but it was subtly hinted at by having Flanders do suggestive things, like throwing her roughly onto the bed. And in a more emotional sense, it also showed how Ned could provide a safe space for Marge to indulge in her passions and interests away from Homer and her stresses. And in doing so, it cleverly entwined the story with Homer's complex of his perfect neighbour, while also bringing Marge into the dynamic of the sad housewife who deserves more. And even though this episode strengthened Homer and Marge's relationship, it's not too hard to imagine that if Homer's neglect continued, Marge might have found herself drawn even closer and closer to Ned. But at the end of the day, these are more just subtle suggestions. It's in Season 15's Diatribe of a Mad Housewife that we see Marge, at the very least, fantasize about Flanders. After a bookstore visit inspires Marge to write her own romantic novel, she writes herself as the main character, Homer as the villain, and Flanders as her love interest. And Marge did initially write Homer as a successful whale hunter, but after he comes home tired, ignoring her and demanding dinner, she rewrites him as a lazy, selfish, drunk fisherman. Whereas she writes Ned as her love interest after he offers her a very helpful gadget from Home Depot.
I've never met a man like you. You listen to what I say? Your body has known the cleansing touch of soap?
The book becomes popular, and some people around Springfield suspect that it's a way for Marge to express her real feelings for Flanders.
The boorish husband, the neglected wife, the sensitive hunk down the road.
And after Homer hears people tease him about Ned being Marge's secret love interest, he reads the book and gets offended. And so, thinking that Ned has turned Marge against him, Homer chases him down for revenge. Lisa then compares this to the novel's ending, where the husband confronts his rival at a cliff, but when Homer confronts Ned, he instead asks him to make him a better man.
How can I be more like you? Just give me some advice.
While Homer once again gets his girl back by the end of the episode, it is unusual that Marge wrote Flanders as her romantic love interest in the first place. This is overtly suggestive, unlike before, where it was more just presumed.
Boy, when you write, you can let your imagination run wild.
You can really see here how the writers were really trying to see and show how Marge may at times compare her husband to her neighbour. And if that still hasn't convinced you, perhaps the most damning evidence of their attraction comes in Season 21's The Devil Wears Nada. Here, Marge's libido is running high after receiving attention from Springfield's men after posing for a sexy calendar, and showing a little more skin than she intended to. But after becoming Carl's executive assistant at the power plant, Homer is far too tired and overworked to satisfy her. And when Homer goes to Paris on a business trip, Marge invites the Flanders family over for dinner. But Lisa and Bart bail on Marge, and Flanders also shows up alone, and it's not long before the innocent dinner soon turns steamy. And as they slowly lean in for a kiss, Marge internally thinks,
Gosh, what a hunk.
But soon, this moment is interrupted by the kitchen timer, but it then picks up again in the dining room, where the two of them share some very sensual strawberries and cream. And it's just when they're about to kiss for the second time that Marge catches a glimpse of her wedding photo reflected in Flanders' glasses. It's here where she realises that despite the temptation, it would be wrong. And luckily Homer arrives just as Marge is bidding Ned goodnight, and they snuggle undisturbed at last. It seems that any sexual tension between Marge and Flanders always seems to occur when Marge is feeling extra neglected by Homer. This suggests that she is looking for emotional fulfillment from someone that she sees as kind and compassionate. And while Marge and Flanders are never physically romantic, they've both experienced temptation and may have some hidden feelings for each other. However, almost kissing twice in The Devil Wears Nada is, I would say, the closest they've ever come to acting on it. Despite all this though, it is clear that Homer will always be Marge's true love. But that said, maybe they do eventually wind up together in the future when Homer is out of the picture, because in season 29's Flanders' Ladder, we get a flash forward that reveals that after Homer's death, Marge and Ned will marry. And I can totally see this working because, well, they're both very naive, dorky and doting, not to mention that in many ways she considers Flanders as the perfect neighbour and often even sides with him over her very own husband.
But I've got to say, I've never seen him be anything but a perfect neighbor.
Oh, he's perfect now, is he?
Ultimately though, this brief scene was just a non-canon joke, but I will touch on this later. So let's circle all the way back to Edna Krabappel. So, like I've already mentioned, we first saw the beginnings of Edna and Ned's relationship all the way back in Alone Again Natra Diddley. And their date obviously didn't work because they were in totally different stages of their lives. Edna was still very invested in Skinner, only dating Ned to make him jealous, and as for Ned, he was still dealing with Maud's death. But flash forward to season 22's The Nedliest Catch, and Edna literally flies right into Ned's arms from a multi-story building.
Oh, did a volcano erupt in Candyland? Cause I just caught me a flying red hot.
Ha! Ah.
And from there, it was love at first catch. He parted the seas for her, and honestly, they seemed very happy. But that all changed when Ned learned a bit too much about Edna's dating past by visiting Moe's.
My email address is ednalover172. It was the lowest number I could get.
This instantly turns Ned off, and it was only after Homer's encouragement that he decided to meet up with her again. And rather than telling Edna he loves her for who she is, he tells her that he forgives her, to which Edna replies,
You sanctimonious prude! Who are you to judge how I've lived my life?
I like how they took this route with Ned because, as we've seen before, he is very naive when it comes to dating, so it is only natural that he may have felt a bit overwhelmed by dating such an experienced woman. And at the same time, I like how Edna stood her ground here and pointed out that Ned was really judging her for her past. But in terms of whether they gel as an actual couple, I'm still not sure. It's no secret that Ned is conservative, but he seems almost disappointed by her reaction, ultimately suggesting that they should just leave it to the higher powers to decide if they should continue their relationship. In other words, us. This scene is then followed by Homer and Marge asking us to head to thesimpsons.com to decide if Ned and Edna should stay together, with the result being announced in the next season's premiere. Now, I do get that this was a fun way to make the audience interact with the show's story, especially in terms of marketing, but in terms of storytelling for Ned and Edna, it just feels a bit lazy. It's almost like the writers weren't entirely sure if the relationship would actually work, so they let the audience call the shots, in case it turned out to be a misstep. So, what did the audience decide? In season 23's premiere, the episode opens with Comic Book Guy at his desk.
The answer to Ned and Edna is carefully hidden in tonight's episode like a breadcrumb lodged inside my stomach crease.
So while CIA agent Wayne is writhing and talking in his sleep, couples all over Springfield can hear him. Homer and Marge, Bernice and Dr. Hibbert, and Ned and Edna. Thus revealing that the audience voted for them to stay together. And it's in the post-credit sequence that the decision is confirmed.
We just wanted to give you all a big thank you from Team Nedna.
It's nice to know people still believe in love.
But this was just a fun reveal in an otherwise pretty normal episode. We don't really get to see too much of their relationship, only that they look quite loved up here. But again, just teasing it kind of makes the relationship feel quite forced, like they have only really committed to it because the audience have voted for them to do so. In fact, we wouldn't get to see any real progression until season 23's Ned and Edna's blended gender. After Ned is taken away by an ambulance, the paramedic stops Edna from entering unless she's immediate family, to which they reveal that they got married in secret.
Ned and Edna married?
That's right.
and the newlyweds seem very content right up until that Edna suggests that Rod and Todd attend Springfield Elementary rather than their usual church school.
When we got married, I knew I'd find some spices in my chili. I guess they can go to Springfield Elementary.
Ugh.
Ned agrees, but after a dream involving a talking dog, seeing his boys get temporary tattoos and their light-up sneakers, Ned decides it's a bit too much, and they have an argument, which results in him spending a night at The Simpsons.
Yesterday, I gave in to the one thing I vowed I would never have in my marriage: strong feeling.
However, when he sees Marge and Homer bickering, it normalizes things for him, eventually deciding to put his issues aside and make up with Edna. I like how this episode dealt with conflict that Ned had never really experienced before. For so long, he and his boys were very sheltered and, let's face it, Flanderized characters. So it was good to see how Edna had expanded their experiences, because with his past relationships, he very strongly maintained his beliefs and a level of naivety, even when confronted with Sarah, Sloane and Ginger, who are perhaps comparable to how Edna was presented at the beginning of the show. But the thing with Edna is that she is trying to help Ned's kids. She isn't just there for Ned, and by helping them, she is helping him see a new perspective on family life, a far more realistic one that is worlds apart from his with Maud's. Ned was the stable, kind man Edna had spent so long searching for, while Edna was the strong woman who would stand up for Ned, doing the unthinkable in getting all the things that Homer borrowed.
Sorry, Ned, but I can't watch this guy push you around anymore.
But sadly, the talented voice actress for Edna, Marsha Wallace, passed away in 2013, and out of respect for her, the show's producers chose not to replace her, and her character was retired. Edna passed away off screen, and in a very sad moment, Ned can be seen wearing a black band and looking very lovingly at a photo of Edna.
Sure do miss that laugh.
I miss her too.
Anyway, I just wish we had a bit more episodes with them together. Like, I can imagine a joint family holiday with The Simpsons or a Christmas episode where they could combine their traditions. I think Edna was a really interesting match for Ned, and perhaps they would have really worked if Wallace had not passed away. That said, the spirit of Edna does continue to visit Ned, which naturally does create some awkward moments, especially when Maud's ghost also shows up. And in Holidays of Future Past, set 30 years into the future, he'll go on to remarry Maud. And in terms of continuity, this appears to be the most consistent future of the show. As I've explained in my video, this is the true future timeline of The Simpsons. And speaking of Ned's future dating life, as I touched on earlier with Flanders' ladder, in addition to marrying Marge, Ned also goes on to date and perhaps marry every single woman in Springfield. Which does make me think that either God is playing a very, very cruel joke on him, or maybe Ned is secretly a Black Widow serial killer. But anyway, killer Ned theories aside, there's one last woman that I want to talk about, Barbara Belfry. If you didn't know, A Serious Flanders is a two-part episode where a ruthless debt collector comes to Springfield and Homer and Ned's lives are sucked into the artfully violent world of prestige TV. It is a parody episode that is considered non-canon, but even still it is worth recognising Ned's love interest in it, a lady called Barbara Belfry. Barbara meets Ned when he comes to the orphanage. She runs to donate a duffel bag full of cash and they hit it off straight away, but their relationship soon hits a bump when he finds out that she's already married to Sideshow Mel.
But don't you worry, hun, we got an arrangement, me and Mel.
What? But like the episode itself, Barbara is kind of a parody. She perfectly represents the genre of the episode because she's modelled after Molly Solverson from Fargo, and she's also strangely a parody of Maud because she sounds a lot like her.
Oh, this was the best night I've had in a month of Sundays.
They both have that Midwestern accent, and the first time that she meets Ned, her outfit is very similar to Maud's. And for me, this instantly detached me from really considering her as one of Ned's love interests, as she seems purely there and built for the parody episode. She's just so quintessentially Ned's type that it doesn't really seem authentic. So we come to the ultimate question: who is Ned's true soulmate? Now, my favourite relationships of Ned's are when he's being challenged, and that was with Rachel, Sarah and Edna. They push him into experiences and emotions that we don't really ordinarily see from him. And when placing him next to Maud, Marge or Barbara, he's less interesting and doesn't seem very emotionally attached. Therefore, this makes me think that someone like Rachel Jordan could be a very believable soulmate for him. She balances that line where she's as religious as him and shares many of his values, but she also pushed him to find the closure he needed. But in terms of the show, she was more of a transitional character guiding Ned towards his next phase in life, being single, ready to date outside of his usual type. And I guess it is true that our differences can make for a stronger bond, something we definitely saw with him and Edna. So ultimately, I do think that Ned's true soulmate was Edna. She pushed him, was there for his kids, was very supportive, while also standing up for herself and being the strong woman that he needed. But who do you think is Ned's true soulmate? And was I wrong to dismiss Barbara Belfry as a candidate? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, thank you so much to my Flying Hellfish patrons, and I'll smell you later.